After the first week of NFL games, my spirit is riding high. Even with that brutal Bengals loss, it is hard not to be filled with optimism at what the rest of the season holds. And after a record high month in New Jersey, there's reason to expect even better returns as we get into the fall. But while we are high on life and record revenues, some people in Colorado appear to be high on something else. I'll explain on this episode of PlayUSA to Z. I'm Jessica Welman, back again for another installment of the biggest gambling news from the casino and sports betting world. If you are inclined to believe that we are the spot to go for this kind of info, be sure to like us, subscribe, and you have to check out my friend Kim Yule on her quest to learn how to sports bet this season. These videos are a ton of fun. All right, I talked so much about NFL action last week, so this week I figured I would change gears and start with talking about college football. Believe it or not, a football program that has no plans to take the field in 2020 dominated the headlines last week. Here's the deal. Like I mentioned in the last video, the pro leagues have, by and large, given up fighting sports betting. And in many jurisdictions like Georgia, pro teams are presenting a united front asking the state to bring betting to the state. College football continues to be a pricklier issue when it comes to wagering, though. Many states followed New Jersey's lead. They banned betting on in-state college teams. Even states that didn't do that have some limitations on college betting. For example, at a regulated book, you're basically never going to find individual props on college athletes, and in-game betting on college games is often off the table too, which is why it is all the more baffling, stunning, and perplexing that the University of Colorado inked a sports betting partnership with POINTSBET. The 5-year deal will benefit the athletic department with a surge of money and resources, and in exchange, POINTSBET gets exposure at Folsom Field, integration into radio broadcasts, and other advertising exposure. Now, proponents of this deal will make the not invalid argument that sports betting is best done out in the open. Regulated is always a better option than unregulated, but all-out endorsing a sports book might be a bridge too far. We're not going to see commercials with a Buffs wide receiver touting POINTSBET. State regulations generally include very specific rules about marketing, and a promo with a 19-year-old kid telling you to bet on him is not going to fly. So take this deal with a measure of restraint and assume it will generally be limited to branding and commercial spots similar to what you hear during pro sporting events. However you feel about the deal, it is a startling departure from how other colleges approach sports betting. At a congressional hearing this summer, Pittsburgh's AD Heather Likey called for a federal ban on college sports betting. NCAA President Mark Emmert is staunchly anti-gambling on college events, and the NCAA had nothing to say about the Colorado deal. While UC Boulder embraces sports betting, schools in Massachusetts are encouraging lawmakers to include a college betting ban in potential sports betting legislation there. The presidents of all 8 schools in the state with D1 programs, that includes Boston College and Harvard, are all encouraging a ban. They claim college betting would lead to unnecessary and unacceptable risk to students, athletes, their campus peers, and the integrity and culture of colleges and universities in the Commonwealth. Even in states with open college betting options, schools try to block betting in some utterly stupid ways. For example, Purdue led the charge in Indiana to ban betting at the school. If students are 21 and betting on a regulated app, they aren't breaking the law, and there's no real way to tell if they are doing that. I suppose if a student openly tweets about a bet or calls up the dean to let them know that they're betting, they run the risk of punishment, but you would have to be really stupid to do something like that. Now, I could argue that limitations on college betting hurt the bottom line for sports books and for states in the form of tax betting revenue, but New Jersey kind of proves that the amount you are losing is probably small potatoes if you're doing everything else right. In August, New Jersey did a ton of things right. Combine that with a one-of-a-kind month that was essentially a sports betting bonanza, and you have the biggest month in U.S. regulated sports betting history. New Jersey sportsbooks accepted $688 million in bets last month. That's a bigger month than Nevada has ever produced, which begs the question, is New Jersey the new Vegas? As the most mature post-PAPSA market, New Jersey has long enjoyed status as the top dog outside of Nevada. But surpassing the Silver State is not as surprising as it sounds when you consider some of the key differences between the two markets. First, Jersey has the people advantage. Yes, tourists do make up for some of the population differential in Nevada. However, as the sportsbook industry continues to move online, that's not going to prevent Nevada from getting left in the dust. Next, New Jersey may not have pro teams in the state beyond the Devils, but its proximity to New York and Philadelphia means that its population is really into sports. Moreover, it can bring people from places like Manhattan across the state line to bet. We've got the Golden Knights and the Raiders in Sin City, but the local sportsbook scene in Nevada is still a pretty new thing. Finally, though, the key difference can be summed up in 3 words. Are you listening? Illinois and Iowa? In-person registration. It's like the Kit Kat jingle. Break me off a piece of that IPR. In New Jersey, 90% of wagers are placed online, and no one had to schlep to Atlantic City to do so. In Nevada, the prohibitive measures of in-person registration to sign up and refund your account is a gigantic barrier to entry. With that, they probably have the comeuppance they deserve, and thanks, Nevada, you just got spanked by the Garden State. Handle in New Jersey essentially doubled from July, and it's not the only state to see such big jumps month to month. In Indiana, betting handle was up $100 million at $169 million in bets. West Virginia handle tripled, and even Iowa, with its lack of IPR, had a 120% increase month over month. We also got our first glimpse into the potential of Michigan. Tribal casinos are not obliged to report retail revenue, so the August revenue report from the Michigan Gaming Control Board only accounted for the 3 retail books at Detroit casinos. With limited capacity on property, the 3 sites managed to accept $14 million in wagers. Needless to say, Thanksgiving and the launch of online betting cannot come soon enough for Michiganders. By the time launch in Michigan rolls around, I have high hopes that the market will look a little different. This week, the AGA put out a responsible marketing code for sports betting for all of its partners. Included in the code are stipulations not to promote problem gambling, no ads in college publications. We'll see how that affects PointsBet and the Buffs. And they want the casinos and sportsbooks to take a proactive step to self-regulating because it's an increasingly problematic issue for casinos and sportsbooks how sports betting is marketed. You might have noticed this weekend that there were wall-to-wall sports betting ads, with FanDuel sponsoring NFL Red Zone on DirecTV, and a new deal between ESPN and Caesars and DraftKings that included in-program commercials for DK. We learned our lesson with the DFS heyday, and we're seeing this play out in Europe right now too. If operators don't curb the ad sales, regulators and the government will intervene. If you follow me on Twitter, you will know one of my social media pet peeves are accounts from sports betting news sites and sportsbooks that like to glorify problematic gambling behavior, like betting your rent on Monday Night Football. This AGA code is one AGA partners, which comprise just about every casino and operator in the country, are obliged to uphold. This kind of accountability and self-regulation is a great step in the right direction. This step could potentially trip up a new operator hitting the Pennsylvania market this week. The gaming industry has spent the better part of a year speculating on what kind of impact Barstool Sports and Penn National will have on the sports betting marketplace. Proponents claim the brand loyal Stoolies are in the prime sports betting demographic. This database of people and that easy path to acquisition could mean Barstool disrupts the FanDuel and DraftKings dominance. Of course, we've seen that personality-driven sportsbooks like Fox Bet struggled to capture market share last season. Barstool is a bit of a different beast, though, in part because it's so proudly anti-corporate. Problem is, when you're anti-corporate, you lack things, like a risk management department. Spotted in photos from a Barstool sports betting app photo shoot were mugs with non-problem gambling-friendly sayings, "Scared money is lost money," and "You can only lose if you quit." Recall, too, that El Presidente, Dave Portnoy, has a rough track record with his day trading and sports betting videos, often experiencing wild and emotional swings in the span of a day. It was just last year that not only did Portnoy openly admit he gambled offshore, but he launched a campaign for his followers to shower anger and complaints on offshore operator MyBookie after the sportsbook mocked him on Twitter. And the incident that sparked the mean tweet? That would be Portnoy and Barstool Big Cat Dan Katz encouraging bettors to, quote, liquidate their assets so that they can bet on a slam dunk Texas Tech bet. Icing on the cake, that particular video was sponsored by FanDuel. Bottom line, Barstool will be an interesting test case for how seriously Penn takes the new AGA initiative, but they're far from the only guilty party who needs to get in line to be AGA compliant. Moreover, who knows when regulators might step in and say people have crossed a line. Okay, I think we need a little levity to end this video on a high note, and I have just the ticket. Or tickets, more accurately. We all know that the lottery is some of the worst gambling odds that you're going to find, right? Yet not one, but two Virginia Lotto players decided to take it upon themselves to make their odds even worse. And guess what? They both won. Play Virginia has the full story, but here's the gist. The game Pick 4 works like it sounds. You pick 4 numbers and you hope they win. Optimum strategy would suggest if you buy 25 tickets, you pick 25 sets of numbers. Unless you're this guy. He bought 25 $5 tickets and picked the same numbers for every single one, so the $5,000 jackpot was instead a $125,000 one. Perhaps word got around this winning strategy worked because a month later, a man won $100,000 doing the exact same thing. His numbers, by the way, 1929, the year the Great Depression began. I wanted to end on a high note, and I ended up with a literal depression, so big fail on my part. Keeping my hopes high the next time I come at you with headlines will keep things on the bright side from start to finish. In the meantime, I'll catch you next time on PlayUSA to Z.